You are listening to Work University, episode 45.
This is Work University, and I'm Annalisa Felix. This is where I interview people from various employment backgrounds and get the inside scoop on what their job is really like. If you're just getting into the workforce, or if you're curious about getting into something new, listen up.
Hello, today I am here with Drew Castillo. And Drew is a corporate training manager, and he's here to talk about what he does, and we'll take a peek behind the curtain. So, welcome, Drew.
Hey, Annalisa, thanks for having me on.
So, tell me, what does that mean? You're a corporate training manager. Can you break it down and get more specific?
Yeah, sure. So, to be a corporate training manager, if we break that apart, first thing is corporate. So, I'm working for-profit corporations. Training represents a specific type of communication. So, it's communication that gets people to change their behavior. And then finally, I'm a manager. So, that means that most of the very hard work is done by the experts that I get to hire and actually do the training nowadays. Whereas I'm mostly focused on making sure that they see the bigger picture of why it is, we're doing what we're doing, why we prioritize what we prioritize. That's closer to my day-to-day job as a manager.
So, for corporate training, does that involve onboarding once the new hire gets there, in addition to training new implementations?
Yeah, wow, Annalisa, that's very astute. So depending on the company, depending on the role, training is so amorphous that it could be, I think in the corporate sphere, the thing that most people associate with training nowadays is cybersecurity training and sexual harassment training and things like that are mandatory and being pushed from the top down to check a box a lot of the time. So people don't pay too much attention to it. But training really is everything that is a formal way of introducing somebody to the organization, like you said, through onboarding. I definitely have taken care of that in various training capacities for different companies, because that is the first way we start to, for lack of a better word, indoctrinate people into a way of thinking. If we do things the Dell way or the HP way or the Apple way or whatever, we have to define what that way is, and we have to communicate that to people and get their buy-in so that they keep acting in that way. So I think that's on the very high, lofty end, right? Like the corporate strategy and all that stuff, which I think is a very important part of training. But then, like you also mentioned, say implementation. So how do you use our product? How does a customer use our product? Who uses our product? Why do they use our product? That all falls under training. And because of that, I've actually worked, although my career of the past 20 years has always been in training, the training function has been part of a support function, part of a marketing department, part of a sales department, part of the engineering department. Like there are so many departments within different companies that might leverage training completely differently. And so sometimes, I'm making training with a wink and a nod about why our product is the best product, right? So, oh, you definitely want to use this brand of duct tape because this brand of duct tape is the only one certified to do X, Y, and Z if you apply it in A, B, and C way. And so it's working as a bit of marketing, but also still trying to inform and get people to, use their duct tape better or whatever.
So, as a manager, then it sounds like you have a training team underneath you.
Yes, so thankfully I do have a team of people with different roles, including that training role. So the training roles are primarily developing content, so understanding a product or a process, and then creating the training for that. But then there are other roles like partnership enablement. So what do we tell people outside of our company that are still using our product but aren't the customers of our product, and all of that like level of subtlety and nuance. But me as a manager, while I do have the skill set to be able to hop in and do a review or to help out with training, pile on if we need to, finish a set of modules before a certain date, most of my time is spent. There's an infinite amount of information that any company wants to communicate, and a limited amount of time that the like attention span for an audience to receive a message, but also B, the people who produce that message to such a degree that it's usable.
Right.
And so with our training team, a lot of that comes down to, hey, we're not going to be working on that because these products over here constitute more of our market share, or they're more in danger, or they're newer, or whatever the objectives are there. We have to pick and choose where we focus our time and attention on.
Does that also involve one, writing, and how important is writing and creating content as a trainer? And two, does that also involve assessments and logging and hand off to, okay, now you can go off to your department and give them the
Oh my
information?
gosh. Absolutely, Annalisa. So I would say that the maybe even the health of a training program could be kind of gauged by the strength of its writing. So at the very low end, you might have somebody who's been doing the job for a week explaining to the person who's been doing the job for a day how to do the job, right? And that's, they're doing it off the cuff and it's very improvisational. But at the very high end, you have highly codified, very specific, very accurate instructions for what's going on at a particular job or in a particular product. And so at least one of my roles, the training team was attached to the documentation team. And so you had technical writers reviewing training scripts and vice versa, because that level of writing needs to be similar, even though the goals and tactics might be slightly different. The writing needs to be at a similar level.
Would this be a position that maybe teachers who would want to transition into another in a direction, would they maybe want to get into this?
Oh, Annalisa, man, that is the $20,000 question, right? So to give you a little bit of background information, that's sort of how I got into this role in the first place. So if you want to flash back to the, hey, what did you major in and why did you major in it and all of that kind of stuff. I was a smart kid in high school, like top 10%, all of that kind of stuff, good SAT scores, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do when I grew up. And the only other people in my family who had college educations, my uncles, all became teachers, every
Mm-hmm.
single one of them. So if they got a college education, they became a teacher. And so that was kind of the, I don't know, a metric for success in my family, right? But I also saw that they struggled within those systems for various reasons. Usually it boils down to we don't value our teachers the way that we should, frankly, for the importance and amount of work and attention that their job takes.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'd end up struggling. And so I respect these people and I like all of that stuff, but I also want to be able to live on my own, not live with my parents forever, be able to afford my own car and do all of that kind of stuff. And so I went, okay, how do I do that? And through college, I started working at a tech support company where I was good at my job, and they asked me to teach other people my job. And I went, oh, this is teaching, but you're going to pay me as a student in college more than what teachers are making with college degrees teaching hundreds of kids. And wow, that really blew my mind and changed my trajectory a lot.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I think that if you're in the mindset of, I have information and I want to share it and I want to convey it in a way that is understandable by people, at the very altruistic end, you end up being a teacher or a grant writer or a speech writer, something like that. And at the, I'll call it the cynical end, you end up in advertising or marketing or
Mm-hmm.
maybe corporate training, right?
Right.
It's in that spectrum for me of saying, hey, I have this talent of helping people understand something, and what I'm going to help them understand is going to make someone a lot of money, right?
Right.
That's a key difference there. So if you can stomach that, I'd say that's a good shift for you. If you like money more than you like the gleaming eyes of children as they learn about whales for the first time, then yeah, definitely consider corporate training. But it is comparatively a slog because the stuff that you're being paid to train people on is not typically the most interesting stuff. It's how to connect to the internet, how to program, how to do these very technical things that maybe only a few hundred or a few thousand people in the world know how to do. But someone needs those directions for later. Someone needs to capture that knowledge. And so, if you've got an appetite for learning new things and conveying that information, even though your audience might be small, yeah, a corporate trainer job, I think, makes a lot of sense for somebody who is moving from teaching.
Right. And there's a lot of different things under that, moving from a younger audience to an adult audience,
Mhm.
mm, moving from getting summers off to working 12 months a year. There's a lot of trade-off with that. But right now, it seems like with training, there's always a need for different technical languages. There might be a handful of languages today in 2022 that won't be translatable in 2 years. So it's a need for somebody who can learn technical language and is adaptable to change. And the money is definitely, I'm going to say probably better than teaching, but again, there are a lot of trade-offs with that. So thank you, and for telling me a little bit about your career path. Now, getting to where you are now, were there any kind of bumps in the road or things that kind of took you by surprise, or anything that comes to mind that you want to share with the audience?
Oh man. Well, I'd say that the two things come up for me, right? Number one, as a Hispanic man, as a brown man, like that is not necessarily a space where, I've worked for some very large companies, for some dot coms, all of that kind of stuff. And throughout them, there are varying levels of acceptance. And so corporate trainer, I think, is one of those things that, depending on the job or the company that you're in, might be seen as more of either a female space or more of a white person space. And so both of those things, as I moved out of jobs, I saw them, there is I don't want to say an overrepresentation, but I don't fit the mold of a white female corporate trainer, which I think is the predominant demographic in this field. And so I would sometimes find resistance in that way, or find that I was maybe the only male in the room at a conference, or people didn't know that I was there to train them, right? And so that can be an uphill battle. But besides that, I'd say that honestly the biggest hurdle is always justification, right? Because training, I'd say, much like the other cynical places like marketing and advertising that I mentioned, needs to be constantly reinforced as valuable. So when a salesperson makes a sale, they can attribute, hey, I made a $1 million sale, and so I'm worth $1 million to this company. So whatever you're paying me, if it's south of $1 million, it's worth it. But with training, we have to constantly go, this is the effect that we're having on support systems, or this is the effect that we're having on customer satisfaction or adoption or whatever, stuff like that. And so that can take its toll, particularly when you don't have the tools or insight necessary to make those connections. So it might be, hey, I'm working in the engineering department and I need the support department to let me know, what's happening to your call volume, what's happening, what are people calling in for, and all of that. And if that department is not cooperative, or for whatever reason, usually because they're so busy that they're like, you want me to pull up a bunch of numbers to help you in your job? Like, that is third priority for me, buddy. I want to help out, but I got to serve our customers first and do all of that. Then it can be really difficult to justify, yeah, I need my salary and also the salaries of trainers and also software and hardware and all of this stuff to do
Hmm.
this mission that I can't prove dollar for dollar is worth that amount of money, unless I know we're saving money on support or we're increasing sales or whatever. Executives almost always want that bottom line mentality of, what are you doing for me today? And that can be a really difficult thing to do. And if you do that unsuccessfully. I've seen training teams get cut. I've seen training teams because they're always considered non-essential compared to the salespeople or the programmers or whatever. They go, oh well, it's training. We can rehire that talent when we're ready, or re-expand that or whatever. But because I can't see a dollars for dollars match, they might be first to go.
Yeah. That's interesting you say that. And from an HR perspective, or even a broader perspective, that is like putting the cart before the horse. And you want to hit that bottom line number, but you want to ease somebody into a role where they can at least know a little bit about what they're doing, and so that I've always found that interesting about the essential and non-essential positions that you mentioned. For the trainers, it sounds like it could be that they are versed in technical, or maybe you have a trainer who's tech today. Next week they have an HR course. Next week they have an employee-wide survey they need to explain. Maybe next week they're training managers on how to use a new annual performance appraisal system that's going live on the 23rd, and everybody has to have sign off and training. So there's a lot of ground to cover there. And I guess, somebody who's willing to be able to pick up something and hit the ground running would be someone who can do a training position. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think you're hitting on something super important, which I might even just call having a very flexible mindset and saying, "Hey, maybe the technique that I learned how to do training 10 years ago no longer is the best technique out there. Maybe the thing I learned how to do to train other people on is no longer in vogue. So now I need to learn new subject and a new method of teaching that subject." Which means you have to have a very elastic mind, a very plastic mindset to be able to move between these things. And so to do that, I think you also need that other thing you mentioned, which is the kind of gumption or ganas, if I can say, like being able to like just go out there and say, yeah, I'm going to try it out. I don't know this yet. I'm going to just run into it with my face. And when I'm wrong, I'm going to learn. And so, that's actually something I say a lot when I talk to people, because I go, hey, Drew, do you have any background in financial service or industrial design or, whatever diverse things it is that I've trained on? And I tell them honestly, no, my background is maybe I listened to a podcast that was interesting about this subject once, but I'm no expert. What I'm willing to do, though, is to be wrong. And the fastest way to get a right answer isn't to pose a question, it's to present a wrong answer. And
Mm.
so when I go to these experts and they say, hey, it's my understanding that economies work in this way, they are going to go, well, here's where you're right and here's where you're wrong and here's the rest of that story. And I very quickly can generate content in that way. But I think if you're somebody who's very concerned about being correct and knowing what you know and being very comfortable, yeah, training is going to be a bit of a more difficult job for you.
Yeah, it sounds like trainers need to have this mindset of coming to the table on a daily basis in pencil and not so much pen, because
Sure.
um, you can learn so much about your course and how it is evolving with the feedback and engagement from your listeners. You never know. Steve in the back, hey, I actually tried this once with this. Oh, and I went here with this, and so what if we tried this, and you never know, you can have a new slide that you're presenting the next day because of the information that you found. So that's great. One thing I'd like to ask you is one more question before we start wrapping up here is, what advice or what would you tell anyone who maybe wants to get into the field of training in corporate?
Oh, yeah. So the first thing is that I would figure out what kind of trainer you're going to be. So there's different kinds that are useful in different ways. One of them, if you really enjoy traveling, you really enjoy people, doing all of that kind of stuff, I would specialize in things like public speaking. Because you might be needed to go on site to a bunch of different customers, and that can be a really exciting job path for a certain kind of person. That's not the path that I took, right? The path that I took was in what they call e-learning, which is a lot of video production, a lot of editing skills. So I would learn how to use industry standard software like TechSmith's Camtasia or Adobe Premiere, but really it just understanding how is video made, how do you impact people with your audio, how do you source royalty-free images and royalty-free music and all of that kind of stuff, and iterate on those things rather than get too stuck on like reading a book about effective training. The thing you need to know about training, which you were just touching on too, Annalisa, was you put this out there and you say, hey, experts, and hey, other people who don't know anything, what do you think? And you iterate and you iterate and you iterate. So whatever you put out there at first is going to be terrible. Like no matter how long you've been doing it, and you just understand, like I'm going to slap this together and it's going to be bad. But then when I get the feedback from other people, I need to be able to narrow that down, and whittle away the parts that they didn't like and add on to the parts that they needed more information on or whatever. And so you end up with this really nice polished thing at the end of a lot of work. And so I'd say that that's one of those other things that I would encourage people to investigate is how closely do you hold your work? Can you give it to somebody else, have them destroy it, and then, reconstitute it back again? Like that resilience, you definitely need that both in writing and in training and any of those other kind of creative endeavors, to take in that feedback and move. So yeah, I'd say that those are the most important things. And then knowing how to learn, right? So being good at studying means that you're good at learning a new process, the same way it meant that you're good at learning a new course in college or high school or whatever. So do you take effective notes? Do you ask the right questions? Are you engaged when you talk to people who are experts in their field? That those are all skill sets that will translate to whatever kind of training position at whatever kind of company with whatever kind of product.
Drew Castillo, corporate training manager. This has been informational. I've learned a lot today. My hope is that for the listener who wants to explore training as a career path, either this is something you want to move forward with and keep investigating and researching, or maybe it's something that I don't think I want to get into that, but it's great learning a couple new things. Either way, equally as important. And Drew, I thank you for your time today and sharing your experience with us.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Annalisa.
Thanks so much for listening. If you have a job you want to learn more about, let me know and I'll create an episode for you. Contact me at hello@workuniversity.org. You can also get new episode announcements when you follow me on Instagram at work.university.